Number 12, JonBenét Ramsey. Number 14, Michelle.
Back to the case of JonBenét Ramsey, it's taken 29 years for this new footage to surface publicly. A seemingly ordinary day for JonBenét at one of her pageant competitions, complete with her talent routine and family applause. But as we break it down, it unlocks key secrets: the true origin of the Santa bear found on that day, the last moment of JonBenét, how the Ramsey family spirited away important evidence from the crime scene, and the web of lies Patsy Ramsey spun to claim innocence. So, what if this innocent clip actually exposes who was really pulling the strings that Christmas night? Stick around as we unpack it all. JonBenét Ramsey's last moments. Before we dive into what some consider fresh evidence or clarifications on long-standing misconceptions, especially around JonBenét's final public appearance, we need to set the stage with the facts as they've emerged. JonBenét's last pageant and her very last performance were two distinct events, separated by a week, each offering a glimpse into her world of child pageants and talent shows. These weren't high-profile spectacles drawing crowds of strangers. They were small, intimate gatherings, mostly attended by families and familiar faces. No reports of suspicious figures lurking, no hints of threats or outsiders zeroing in on her. This absence of any red flags in these settings challenges the notion of an intruder stalking her through such events, forcing us to question how an unknown perpetrator could have targeted her without leaving a trace in these public moments. Let's start with the pageant on December 15, 1996. It was a Sunday, and JonBenét competed in the All-Stars Kids Christmas pageant at the Airport Holiday Inn just outside Denver. This marked her final formal pageant, a structured competition where she entered as contestant number 12. She performed her talent routine. From what we know, she shone in the event, winning multiple titles, including Little Miss Christmas. Her prizes reflected the holiday theme: a talent winner medal that became a cherished item for her father, John Ramsey, and a Santa bear dressed in a red and white suit. Please note that detail. We'll talk about it in later parts. Back to that day, John arrived late, missing her actual performance but making it in time for the awards. He recalled her running up to him, excited, and placing the medal around his neck, saying something along the lines of, "Dad, Dad, I won this for you."
The event was a couple weeks before she died, and I was late to get there. But I always tried to go to watch her little talent thing. And she came running up to me and said, Dad, I won this for you. And it was a medal, and it was all talent winner.
It was a moment he often highlighted in later interviews, emphasizing his support for her talent over the competitive side, always telling her to focus on having fun rather than winning or losing. Patsy Ramsey, JonBenét's mother, was there from start to finish, deeply involved as she often was in these activities. The event itself was low-key, far from the glamorous productions some might imagine. Footage captured the atmosphere: a handful of participants, sparse applause that sounded like it came mostly from family members in the audience. There were no large crowds, no throngs of spectators packing the venue. It felt more like a family affair than a public spectacle, with parents and siblings cheering on their own. We can see no evidence of evidence that can later attract outsiders or predators scanning the room and notice JonBenét. John himself noted in discussions that these pageants were open enough that anyone could walk in and sit down, pretending to be a relative, but he didn't spot anyone out of place, no strangers in raincoats lurking in corners. This detail underscores the lack of any overt threats. If an intruder was supposedly fixated on JonBenét from her pageant circuit, this event offered no clear opportunity for surveillance without standing out in such a small group. This brings us to December 22, 1996, JonBenét's absolute last public appearance, distinct from the formal pageant structure of the week before. This wasn't another competition with judges and titles. It was a casual talent show at the Southwest Plaza Mall in Littleton, south of Denver. She opened the show as a solo act, taking the stage with energy that matched her reputation as a happy-go-lucky kid full of life. Dressed in a red outfit that fit the holiday season, She sang, "Rockin'" around the Christmas tree, while playing a toy saxophone, earning applause from the shoppers milling about. It was a light-hearted performance, captured in video, that shows her engaging the audience in a mall setting, not a dedicated venue, but a public space where families were out doing last-minute holiday errands. An eyewitness who shared the bill that day remembered her vividly, sitting on a plinth beforehand, surrounded by professionals adjusting her hair and applying full makeup. This stood out as unusual compared to the other local kids performing, who might have just a touch of lipstick or mascara done by their moms. JonBenét's preparation reflected the polish from her pageant background, but the event itself remained low profile, drawing casual onlookers rather than a dedicated crowd. Again, there's no sign of any threats here. The mall was busy with holiday activity, but the talent show didn't attract hordes of strangers fixated on the performers. Shoppers clapped warmly, but it was far from a scenario where an intruder could blend in to stalk a specific child without notice. The absence of any suspicious behavior reported by witnesses or the family further weakens the idea that someone was tailing JonBenét through these outings. If an unknown perpetrator had been building toward an attack, these public moments, especially one so close to Christmas, would likely have shown some anomaly, like an unfamiliar face lingering too long or following her afterward. Instead, everything points to normalcy, a 6-year-old enjoying the spotlight in safe, familiar environments surrounded by supportive people. Distinguishing these two appearances sharpens our understanding of the timeline. The December 15 pageant was a competitive affair, complete with numbered contestants, talent segments, and prizes handed out on stage. And lasted much of the day, with John carrying her trophies and costumes to the car afterward, as recalled by those present. Patsy socialized with other mothers, and the family dynamic shone through. John late but proud, JonBenét thrilled to share her win. In contrast, the December 22 mall event was shorter, more impromptu, focused purely on performance without the pageant trappings. She opened solo, no crowns or medals this time, just applause from passersby. The red outfit she wore that day lingered in the family's routine. Patsy later mentioned laying JonBenét's red jumpsuit over the ironing board on the morning of December 26, because it had spots from the performance, planning to take it to the dry cleaners after their trip. This small detail ties the event directly to the hours before her death, showing how these appearances were part of everyday life, not magnets for danger. John's recollections in interviews reinforce this separation. He often spoke of attending her talent portions at pageants, like the one on December 15, where he stressed supporting her skills over the glamour. He didn't mention the mall show specifically, perhaps because it lacked the formal structure of pageants, but his general emphasis on fun aligns with both events. Burke, her brother, touched on family dynamics in his own discussions, noting how pageants were more of a mother-daughter thing, with him and John doing other activities. He didn't reference the December 22 performance directly, but his comments suggest these outings didn't disrupt the household in ways that invited external risks. No family member ever reported feeling watched or uneasy at either event. What stands out most is how these appearances lacked any elements that could support an intruder narrative. The pageant was intimate, with applause sounding like it came from relatives only. No pals or strangers noted. As John himself observed, the group seemed composed of parents and siblings. The mall show, while in a public space, drew casual attention from shoppers, not the kind of focused crowd where someone could hide intent. Eyewitness accounts describe a positive, energetic girl, glamorized perhaps beyond the norm for her peers, but in a setting free of threats. If an intruder had been scouting her, these back-to-back holiday events would have been prime opportunities, yet nothing surfaced, no odd encounters. No follow-ups reported to police. This gap forces us to reconsider, were these really the gateways for an outsider to target her, or do they point elsewhere? The Santa Bear. Returning to the important evidence, recent footage has sparked community discussions again about one of the most controversial items in the case. The Santa Bear, and more shockingly, it's the direct evidence showed that Patsy Ramsey lied about her daughter's death. The bear dressed in a red and white Santa suit first caught attention right after JonBenét's murder on December 26, 1996. It showed up in crime scene photos, lying on the twin bed next to hers in her bedroom. Investigators noted it during the initial processing of the house, and it quickly became a focal point because it seemed out of place. Family members, including Patsy Ramsey, said they didn't recognize it at all. That claim turned it into a potential clue, something that might point to an intruder who either left it behind or used it to draw the 6-year-old out of her room. The bear's holiday theme fit the Christmas timing, but its unfamiliarity raised questions about how it got there. Patsy's sister, Pam Poff, added to the intrigue with her account of seeing the bear during her visit to the house on December 28, 1996. She had permission from police to go in and gather some items for the family, like clothes and memorabilia, since they had left in a hurry after the discovery of JonBenét. Pam spotted the bear on the secondary bed in JonBenét's room, and it stuck out to her as something she didn't know. She didn't take it with her, focusing instead on other things like a medal JonBenét had won recently. But Pam later suggested the bear might have played a role in luring JonBenét, maybe even holding a note in its pouch with instructions for her to follow. That idea came up in discussions, tying into theories about how the crime unfolded. Pam also mentioned the bear's seasonal nature, noting how Santa-themed items like this would typically be packed away outside of Christmas, making its presence even more puzzling if no one in the family remembered it. The media latched onto the Santa bear story hard, turning it into headline news that fueled public fascination with the case. Stories popped up with titles like Bear Facts of JonBenét Slay Santa, Teddy and Letters to Prof May Crack Casa, from the New York Post in 2006, revisiting how the toy had stumped investigators for years. Another one from the Denver Post in 1999 detailed how prosecutors launched a rare online appeal for info about the teddy bear dressed like Santa Claus, reportedly found in JonBenét's room. District Attorney Alex Hunter got involved, calling on the public for tips in 1998 and 1999, treating it as a possible breakthrough in identifying the killer. Headlines such as, Toy Bear May Be JonBenét Clue, and Teddy Bear and Letters to Prof May Crack Casey kept the story alive, suggesting it could link to letters or other evidence. The coverage painted the bear as a central mystery, one that might hold the key to cracking the case wide open. Authorities even explored sales records and shipping details for that model of bear, hoping to trace its origin. Supporters of the Ramsey family ramped up the mystery around the bear, arguing it was too seasonal to just be a random household item. They pointed out how Santa Claus teddy bears aren't something you'd see in June or July. They get packed up with Christmas decorations and brought out only for the holidays. That made its appearance in the bedroom photos seem suspicious, like it had been introduced by someone outside the family. No one, including the housekeeper, recalled seeing it before the murder, which backed the idea that it vanished afterward, supporting an intruder who might have taken it or left it as a taunt. This line of thinking fit into broader narratives pushing for an outside perpetrator, turning the bear into what some called a vital clue in the unsolved killing. Connections to other figures in the case added more layers to the controversy surrounding the Santa bear. Bill McReynolds, a family friend who played Santa Claus at the Ramses' holiday party on December 23, 1996, came under scrutiny. He had been in the home just days before the murder, interacting closely with JonBenét. Theories linked the bear to him, especially since his wife had written a play years earlier about a young girl abducted and found death in a basement, a detail that echoed the circumstances of JonBenét's death. McReynolds gave hair and handwriting samples to police, and investigators questioned him multiple times, but no direct evidence tied him to the bear or the crime. Some speculated he recruited someone younger to carry out the act, perhaps filming or photographing it. With the bear as a symbolic element from his Santa role, JonBenét had told a friend about expecting a special visit from Santa after Christmas, which some tied to McReynolds, though it might have just been a family story about their post-holiday plans. Police re-interviewed McReynolds and his wife in March 1997, checking their alibis and any possible links to the bear. Despite the suspicions, nothing concrete emerged, but the association kept the bear entangled in outsider theories. Detective Steve Thomas, a lead investigator on the case, offered a different take in his book, JonBenét Inside the Ramsey Murder Investigation. Published in 2000, he downplayed the bear as not the huge mystery many made it out to be, suggesting it was probably among the items removed from the house on December 28 by Pam Poff. Thomas argued it was just one of JonBenét's several stuffed animals, not some elaborate clue from an intruder who brought it to lure her. He questioned why it became such a focal point, implying the real issue lay in the family's denial of owning it. In the book, Thomas explores the investigation in detail, painting the bear as a red herring that distracts from more straightforward explanations. His perspective shifted some focus away from wild intruder scenarios, emphasizing how murders are usually what they seem, without backup weapons like a bear if the primary plan failed. Recent footage from a pageant competitor, shared nearly 29 years after the murder, brought the Santa bear back into sharp focus. It captured the All-Stars Kids Christmas pageant on December 15, 1996, where JonBenét won Little Miss Christmas. The video shows the prizes on display, including what looks like the Santa bear among other holiday items like a Christmas tree and a Santa Claus figure. Detective Jane Harmer, who worked the case from just days after JonBenét was found, confirmed the bear's true origin by reviewing similar pageant video in the late 1990s. She identified it as a prize given out by organizer Leona Grego from the All-Stars or America pageant group, bought from a mail-order company in Nebraska. The footage places the bear on a prize table, part of the awards for winners like JonBenét, who also got a talent medal that day. John Ramsey carried the prizes to the car afterward, and Patsy was there the whole time. This ruled out any intruder planting it. It came home legitimately from the event. We see how this debunked the intruder angle tied to the bear. It wasn't discovered in suspicious ways, but as a straightforward gift from a pageant the family attended. Police learned it was distributed to JonBenét and other children at the AmeriKids event in Boulder days before the murder. The bear ended up recovered around mid-2000 from boxes in Patsy's parents' basement in Roswell, Georgia, after a search by the Ramseys team. It had been packed with items from JonBenét's Colorado room, suggesting it never truly disappeared but stayed in family possession. It's clear that Patsy lied about not recognizing the bear. In her 1988 interviews, she denied knowing it when shown the bedroom photos. Her book, Death of Innocence, on page 273, describes seeing the bear in those images and sparking a nationwide search because it was unfamiliar. But the footage places her at the pageant where it was awarded, contradicting her claims. This inconsistency highlights how the bear, once a supposed vital clue creating illusions of an outsider, turned into proof of inside knowledge. Harmer's confirmation solidified it as a pageant artifact, not something left by a perpetrator. For more details about what Patsy Ramsey explained for the bear's existence, in her 1998 interviews, she flat out denied knowing anything about it when shown the photos from JonBenét's bedroom. She said point blank, "I do not recognize this bear." And even after being asked if the public appeals jogged her memory, she insisted it didn't ring any bells. Why would she stick to that when pressed multiple times? It raises questions about whether she was holding back, or if something deeper was at play. Then, in her August 28, 2000, deposition in Landa, with her lawyer Lynn Wood right there, she kept up the same line, claiming she didn't recognize it at first. She floated the idea that it might have been a different bear altogether. A white angel one with a banner that JonBenét had won, instead of the Santa-suited version. But how does that square with the details that came out later? She explained how the bear turned up by saying she directed a security helper, John Matthews, to dig through boxes from JonBenét's old room in Colorado, which were stashed in her parents' basement during some remodeling. She made it sound like it got packed away in the chaos after the murder, and their quick move, just overlooked in the shuffle. Was this a genuine mix-up, or does it point to a pattern of selective recall? Patsy also claimed a kind of foggy memory about the whole thing, not bothering to correct the prosecutor's slip-up on the date, saying December 14 instead of 15 and reacting with surprise, like, "Oh, really?" when told the video placed the bear right there with her in it. She doubled down on her version, insisting her mind went to a non-Santa bear instead. What makes this odd is how it clashes with other accounts of her sharp attention to detail in family matters. In the book she co-wrote with John, Death of Innocence, she talked about spotting the bear in those bedroom photos and kicking off a nationwide search because it seemed so unfamiliar. She framed it as an innocent mistake that snowballed into media hype, without touching on any later clarifications. When pushed on if her story shifted between 1998 and 2000, she said no. It stayed the same. It was still a bear she didn't know, even after it got recovered. Yet she admitted guiding the search to JonBenét's stored items. Why acknowledge that part but not the rest? Her explanations kept shifting a bit, like suggesting it could be an angel variant from some other time. And she even thanked the prosecutor for trying to jog her memory, but in the end, she didn't budge on prior knowledge. Her lawyer jumped in on the tough questions, which only adds to the sense that these responses were carefully managed. Overall, she painted the bear as some side mystery she accidentally blew up, but the conflicts with what emerged later leave us wondering about the full picture. Now, as we look at assumptions about why Patsy might have lied about the bear, one possibility points to genuine shock and psychological denial kicking in after the trauma. Her reaction? Oh really? When confronted with details about the bear's placement, comes across as a classic defensive move: surprise, denial, then deflection. Could this be a sign of her mind freezing out memories, tied to the last happy moments with JonBenét? In cases involving guilt or deep trauma, a parent might unconsciously block out objects linked to the loss, like the bear representing innocence right before the nightmare. This isn't about deliberate deception, but a self-protective mechanism, where the brain dissociates from painful symbols. How else to explain sticking to denial even as facts piled up? It fits with patterns of post-traumatic denial, where admitting knowledge would force confronting the full horror. Another assumption leans toward Patsy lying to dodge any blame for carelessness, protecting her social image. As a former Miss West Virginia, she put a lot of stock in appearances, perfection, and how the world saw her family. Admitting she knew the bear would mean owning up to it, being in the room, near the location of JonBenét, perhaps placed there during the holidays or overlooked in the routine. Why risk looking like a negligent mom who didn't notice every detail in her daughter's space? Denying it shifts the focus away from her oversight, preserving that perfect mother fakehead. But doesn't this create more holes? Why start a search if it exposes family gaps? It's the kind of lie that guards reputation, especially under the media glare that scrutinized every parental choice. A third line of thinking assumes Patsy lied to keep the intruder theory alive as a legal defense strategy. By saying, "I don't recognize that bear," she planted the seed that it didn't belong in the home, opening the door for ideas about an outsider bringing it in. Her sister Pam built on this, suggesting the bear could have lured JonBenét or held a hidden note. At the time, from 1997 to 1999, the heat was on the family, with investigators and the public eyeing them closely. Pushing the narrative outward, toward some foreign intruder, diverted attention from inside the house. Why else amplify a mystery that conveniently fits an external threat? It's strategic, part of a broader effort by the family and their legal team to steer the story away from internal suspicions. Finally, the deepest assumption is that Patsy lied because she might have placed the bear by JonBenét herself after the death. The bear's journey, from the room on December 28, past Pam's haul of items, to turning up in Georgia, suggests family handling of evidence. Admitting ownership would tie her to manipulating the scene, perhaps in a panic. Why direct a search later if not to control the narrative? Denying it outright severs that chain, protecting from implications of direct involvement in the aftermath. But doesn't this raise even bigger questions about what happened that night? The inconsistencies pile up, leaving us to sift through the layers of what her words really meant. In comparison with the other evidence found at the scene, the Santa bear and the ransom note stand out as two elements that invite direct comparison, both potentially serving as red herrings to divert attention from what really happened that night. The ransom note, discovered on the spiral staircase by Patsy on the morning of December 26, 1996, was a lengthy, handwritten document spanning nearly 3 pages, demanding $118,000, almost exactly matching John Ramsey's recent Christmas bonus from his company. Written on paper and with a pen from the Ramseys' own home, it contained odd phrasing like references to a small foreign faction and warnings not to involve police, which struck investigators as usually verbose and cinematic for a typical kidnapping demand. Handwriting analysis later pointed to similarities with Patsy's style, including specific letter formations and quirks, raising questions about whether it was crafted to mimic a stranger's work, while actually originating from within the household. Why would a real intruder take the time to compose such a detailed note on site, risking discovery, instead of bringing a pre-written one? This setup mirrors the Santa bear's placement in JonBenét's bedroom, photographed on the adjacent twin bed during the initial crime scene sweep. Both items appeared positioned to suggest an outsider's involvement, the note fabricating a kidnapping motive, the bear implying a lure or planted token from a perpetrator with a twisted holiday theme. We see parallels in how these pieces could have been intentionally arranged to mislead the investigation, creating a narrative of an external threat while masking internal dynamics. The note's demand for a precise sum tied to John's finances hinted at insider knowledge, much like the bear's holiday attire aligning too neatly with the Christmas timing to seem coincidental, if meant to distract. If an intruder truly entered the home, carried out the crime, and escaped undetected, why leave behind such elaborate props that prolonged exposure? The note even included dramatic lines like, "Victory, SBTC," which some interpret as a bogus signature to add flair. Similar to how the bear's presence fueled theories of a Santa-obsessed killer lurking from the family's recent party. Both elements delayed focus on the family. The note prompted a wait for a call that never came, buying time before JonBenét was discovered in the basement, while the bear sparked a nationwide search that shifted scrutiny outward. Could these have been staged to conjure an intruder out of thin air, perhaps in a panicked attempt to cover an accident or altercation gone wrong? The inconsistencies, such as the note's length defying quick composition under stress, and the bear's eventual recovery from family storage, suggest manipulation to obscure the truth. Detective Jane Harmer, who joined the Boulder Police Department's efforts early on, harbored deep suspicions that aligned with this view of potential staging. Assigned to the case shortly after the murder, Harmer delved into evidence like the note and other scene details, later expressing in interviews that she believed the parents bore indirect responsibility for JonBenét's death. She agreed with the 1999 grand jury's recommendation to indict John and Patsy on charges of child mistreatment resulting in death, and accessory to a crime, pointing to how the evidence didn't support an intruder, but rather suggested family involvement. Harmer's perspective, shared in media appearances nearly 2 decades later, highlighted red flags such as the untouched crime scene allowing contamination and the family's narrative clashing with physical findings. Why, she implied, would key items like the note contain insider details, if not crafted by someone close? Her ongoing role in investigations, even after retiring, underscores a belief that the truth lay within the home, not with some phantom outsider. The hidden evidence. The Santa bear, though mysterious, is just one of many pieces of evidence in this case. However, despite being numerous, the evidence was handled in a surprisingly careless manner, with many of them now completely in the hands of the Ramsey family, without any police intervention. One way the Ramsey family hid these pieces of evidence was by burying them with JonBenét. As we gather more on this aspect of the investigation, the burial items stand out for how they removed potential clues from forensic scrutiny forever. JonBenét's funeral took place on December 3, 1996, just 5 days after JonBenét was discovered in the basement of the family home in Boulder, Colorado. The service was held at Peachtree Presbyterian Church in Atlanta, Georgia, where the Ramseys had ties from Patsy's earlier life. From there, her remains were interred at St. James Episcopal Cemetery in Marietta, Georgia, right next to her half-sister, Elizabeth Pash Ramsey, who had died in a car accident in 1992 at age 22. This quick out-of-state burial raised eyebrows among some investigators, as it limited any chance for additional autopsies or examinations back in Colorado. JonBenét had been released by the Boulder County Coroner's Office after the initial autopsy on December 27, which confirmed cause of death, along with noting pineapple in her digestive system, a detail that later tied to a bowl found untouched in the kitchen. But by rushing the burial, any lingering questions about overlooked traces on JonBenét or accompanying items got sealed away, literally underground. We start with the white pageant dress JonBenét was buried in, a silk organza gown that Patsy had bought secondhand over Thanksgiving weekend in 1996. It came from another contestant named Rihanna at the Dreamstar pageant in Rome, Georgia, after Patsy struck up a conversation with Rihanna's family at a restaurant and asked about the outfit they were selling. Patsy ended up purchasing this custom-made costume, which JonBenét wore in her final pageant on December 15, 1996. As a piece of clothing directly from her pageant life, this dress could have held evidentiary traces like fibers matching those found at the crime scene or DNA from handlers at the event. But since no testing was done before burial, any potential links to suspects or timelines vanished with it. Why bury her in a used pageant gown instead of something more personal from home? It emphasizes how pageant elements dominated even in death, but it also meant losing a garment that might have carried microscopic clues, like makeup residues or hairs from the airport holiday venue outside Denver, where she competed that day. Along with the dress, JonBenét was laid to rest wearing the tiara she won at that same December 15 pageant, where she took the Little Miss Christmas title. This shiny accessory, handed out as a prize by organizer Leona Grego, could theoretically have fingerprints from other participants, judges, or even family members who handled it post-event. Jon Ramsey carried the trophies and costumes to the car after the pageant, so his prints might be expected. But what about others? Burial eliminated any forensic lift, raising questions about missed opportunities. Could smudges or touch DNA on the tiara have pointed to someone outside the family circle? In interviews, Pam Pouf, Patsy's sister, addressed this choice, saying JonBenét was in one of her little dresses she competed in and wore a little tiara she won in one of the pageants. Pam seemed surprised and asked about it, responding with, "Buried in a what?" before explaining it as fitting for who JonBenét was. But this decision locked away an item that might have connected to broader theories, like whether pageant attendees played a role in the tragedy. JonBenét's favorite toy, Kitty, also went into the casket with her. This stuffed animal held deep sentimental value, but Pam missed grabbing it during her December 28 visit to the Boulder home, where she collected trunkloads of items with police permission. Patsy wanted Kitty specifically for the burial, so Officer Linda Arndt went back to retrieve it from the house. As something from JonBenét's bedroom, Kitty could have borne marks or residues from the night of the murder, perhaps fibers from the duct tape or cord used in the crime, or even touch DNA if handled during the incident. Why let such a personal item, potentially contaminated from the scene, go untested? Its burial meant any evidentiary secrets it held stayed buried too, much like how the K-apple detail from the autopsy never got matched against traces on toys or clothing that might have been present. A gold cross was tucked into the casket as well, an item whose origins aren't fully clear, but could have come from the family's collection. If it was from the home, this cross might have served as a surface for fingerprints or DNA, especially if worn or handled around the time of the murder. Theories swirl around religious symbols in the case, but without testing, its potential as evidence evaporated. Similarly, a teddy bear, distinct from the infamous Santa bear, was included in the burial. This could relate to the array of toys photographed in JonBenét's bedroom during the initial scene processing, possibly holding fibers or traces if it was near JonBenét or moved during staging. Why include another bear when one was already sparking mysteries? Its entombment removed it from analysis, leaving us to wonder if it did to the bedroom setup or other overlooked clues. Other items reportedly given as casket gifts included a scarf, bracelet, and another cross, which some tie symbolically to the SBTC signature on the ransom note found that morning. These could represent family tributes, but theories suggest they might echo overlooked evidence. If the scarf matched fibers from the scene or the bracelet held DNA, burial ensured no confirmation. How does a family decide on these specifics amid grief, and why weren't they documented or tested first? The quick interment on December 31, just days after the autopsy, compounded this, transporting JonBenét to Georgia for burial next to Elizabeth limited Boulder authorities' access. While the location itself isn't evidentiary, the haste might have stemmed from emotional needs, but it effectively shielded items from further probes. We note how the autopsy's findings, like the pineapple in her system, don't directly link to these burial items, but if any bore food traces or related residues from the kitchen bowl, they're gone forever. Patsy, as the driving force in decisions like the pageant dress and tiara, played a central role here. Her background as a former beauty queen influenced burying JonBenét in competition attire, perhaps to honor that part of her life. But this choice also meant potential clues vanished, emphasizing how family control over the burial process could have hidden key traces. Pam's role in collecting items ties in too. She grabbed memorabilia but missed Kitty, forcing Arndt's return trip. This handling shows a pattern where sentimental choices overrode investigative needs, leaving critical evidence out of reach. The casket gifts, from the cross to the scarf, bracelet, and tiara, all carried symbolic weight, but their evidentiary potential, touch DNA, fibers, or prints, went untapped. In the chaos post-murder, with JonBenét released swiftly, these items slipped away. Patsy wanted JonBenét surrounded by familiar things, but did that include shielding clues? The gold cross and teddy bear, if from the home, might have matched scene photos, but burial sealed them off. Even the pineapple detail, tying to household evidence, underscores lost connections. If traces lingered on burial toys, they're buried now. This process highlights how grief and haste combine to bury not just a child, but possibly the keys to solving her death. As we dig deeper into the JonBenét Ramsey case for our channel's ongoing analysis, Patsy's sister, Pam Poff's involvement in removing items from the family home stands out as a pivotal moment that raised serious questions about the investigation's integrity. Right after JonBenét was discovered on the morning of December 26, 1996, the house was sealed off as an active crime scene. 2 days later, Pam arrived in Boulder, and on December 28, she was granted permission by police to re-enter the home with a list of things she wanted to retrieve. That list reportedly included clothing, photos, dolls, and other personal effects from JonBenét's space. According to Pam's own account, officers accompanied her every step of the way. Whenever she pointed to an item, the police would handle the packing and sealing themselves. She insisted she didn't touch the scene or take anything on her own initiative, framing it as a supervised process to help the grieving family get essentials. But other witnesses and former investigator Steve Thomas painted a starkly different picture. Thomas described Pam going in and out of the house at least 6 times that day, carrying boxes, large bags, suitcases, plastic bins, and miscellaneous items. He noted she spent hours inside during these trips, emerging with toys, stuffed animals, crowns, 3 pageant dresses, photo catalogs from competitions, Burke's clothing, John's notebooks, a Bible, and documents from the desk. This account suggests a far more extensive removal than just basics, turning the visit into what some called a raid that stripped the scene of numerous belongings. We note how several of these items carried significant evidentiary value. The Little Miss Christmas medal JonBenét won at her pageant on December 15, 1996, was one such piece, directly tied to her recent activities, and later handed over by Pam to John as a keepsake. Pam also took dolls and stuffed animals from JonBenét's bedroom, along with photos and albums from her pageant appearances, which could have offered insights into her daily life and psychological context. Personal effects from John and Patsy, like the Bible, notebooks, work papers, cards, and family documents, rounded out the haul. These were things that, in hindsight, should have been seized early for forensic review. From Pam's statements and cross-referenced details, it's clear she moved a substantial volume of objects out of the home while it remained under police control, effectively altering the scene's contents before a full inventory could be completed. Criticisms of the Boulder police for facilitating this action came fast and fierce, highlighting what many saw as fundamental flaws in the handling of the case. Steve Thomas, who was on the investigative team at the time, called it an unacceptable loosening of protocols for protecting the crime scene. He argued that the house should have been frozen entirely until all trace evidence was collected, rather than allowing a relative to point out and remove items. Thomas accused the police chief or district attorney's office of greenlighting Pam's entry under the guise of helping with preparations. Without following standard legal procedures or independent oversight, the inventory logs, he said, amounted to just a few sketchy lines, breaking the chain of custody and rendering any later discovered items from the Ramseys suspect in court. Local reporters and forensic experts piled on, labeling the Boulder PD as incompetent and swayed by emotion or social pressure. They pointed out how the department, already viewed as out of its depth, granted privileges to a prominent, affluent family that no average suspect would receive. In later interviews, John and Patsy expressed gratitude for the police letting Patsy's sister into the home to gather things, a remark that critics interpreted as an indirect admission of the exceptional treatment they got. Why did the police allow the family to keep or handle these potentially crucial pieces of evidence? Several factors came into play, all reflecting the disarray and inexperience plaguing the early stages of the probe. First off, the Boulder PD lacked expertise in major homicide cases. Before JonBenét, the city rarely dealt with murders, and the team hadn't managed a complex scene like this. They didn't fully grasp how permitting family access could shatter the investigative process. Second, political and media pressure loomed large. A case flooded Boulder with cameras, and city officials aimed to show compassion toward a family in mourning. The police chief and prosecutors felt influenced by Patsy's image as a grieving mother who had just beaten cancer, leading them to approve Pam's entry for humanitarian reasons. Third, at that point, the police still trusted the Ramseys and hadn't pegged them as primary suspects. Without a full search warrant or detailed scene analysis in place, they saw no harm in letting Pam grab what seemed like innocuous items. By the time the mistake sank in, JonBenét had been processed, the house tampered with, and Pam's statements became part of an irreversible chain of errors that hampered the case for years. Theories of cover-up and bias swirl around this episode, with many independent analyses viewing December 28 as a link in a sequence that conveniently lost or neutralized evidence. One prevailing idea holds that the removal helped obscure traces pointing inward, allowing the family to control what investigators could access. Bias shows up in how the police extended leniency to the Ramseys due to their status, effectively letting Patsy's sister act as a proxy to sanitize parts of the scene. Patsy's role looms large here, as she reportedly compiled the detailed list for Pam, directing what to prioritize without being physically present. She was at a hotel during the raid. This suggests coordinated effort, not spontaneity, with Pam following instructions to scoop up items that might carry forensic value, like clothing, bedding, or toys potentially bearing DNA or fluids. Some investigators speculated Patsy feared traces of paint, blood, or cleaners on these objects, prompting her to have Pam collect them under the radar. The matchup between the metal Pam took and other bedroom items reinforces suspicions that this was targeted cleanup, shielding family vulnerabilities from scrutiny. Patsy's influence extended beyond the list. As someone deeply invested in her daughter's public image, she maintained oversight of JonBenét's belongings even after the tragedy. She decided where the removed items would go and how they'd be used, ensuring control over materials that could reveal more about the household dynamics. When asked later why so much needed to be taken, Patsy responded vaguely about wanting things handled a certain way, a statement that fueled doubts about the true intent. Her background as a former beauty queen, accustomed to managing appearances, fits theories where she orchestrated the raid to protect the family's narrative. Bias in the police response amplified this, granting access that broke protocols and potentially aided concealment. We see how Patsy's directives to Pam turned a compassionate allowance into a strategic move, with the removed items, photos, crowns, dresses, serving to preserve a polished story while possibly erasing messier truths. The grand jury's later push for charges on accessory grounds hence for interplay, where Patsy's planning through Pam disrupted the evidentiary trail. Overall, her central position in guiding the removal underscores how family ties and police deference intertwined, feeding ongoing debates about what got lost in those boxes and bags. The alive puppet. It seems clear that Patsy's role in concealing evidence was substantial. But turning back to the biggest question in this case, who was the killer? Her involvement probably needs more than just a few papers and statements to pin down. As we gather details on the JonBenét Ramsey mystery for our channel's analysis, Patsy's battle with cancer in 1993 marks a turning point that shaped her relationship with her daughter. Diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer at age 36, she faced surgery and treatment that left her on the brink multiple times. After that, she slipped into depression, feeling a loss of control over her and fearing recurrence. Lawrence Schiller's account in Perfect Murder, Perfect Town describes how she lost her sense of femininity and bodily integrity during this period. JonBenét, born and growing up amid Patsy's recovery, became the focal point of her remaining life energy. Family and friends often said Patsy saw herself in JonBenét, with the child serving as a mirror for her own survival. Seamstress Pam Griffin, who made pageant outfits for JonBenét, put it bluntly, Patsy lived through her daughter. She lived through her. The illness pushed Patsy to recreate herself through her child's perfection, almost like a mask of immortality. Some analyses suggest pageants turned into medicine for her survival, with JonBenét as the doll carrying that cure. In this light, JonBenét wasn't just a child anymore, but a living symbol of triumph over death, a doll baby, representing the ideal image of her who had beaten the odds. Patsy dove headfirst into the pageant world from 1994 to 1996, handpicking dresses, sewing them herself, applying makeup, and coaching lines for JonBenét. Housekeeper Linda Wilcox recalled how everything had to match Patsy: hair, lipstick, shoes, making them look like twins. JonBenét and her mother wore matching outfits, used the same lipstick, and Patsy often called her Little Miss Me. Witnesses described extreme control during a chickenpox episode in 1995. Patsy called the doctor not for the child's comfort, but to ask how soon the spots could be cleared for a photo session. When JonBenét had bedwetting issues, Patsy's reactions came across as anger over embarrassment rather than concern, yelling things like, "How could you do that? You're not a baby!" The girls' rooms were decorated like a doll's space, with a pageant room, displaying trophies, ribbons, and photos. Patsy kept the key and frequently rearranged everything, labeling some items, for display only. In pageant videos, Patsy stood right by the stage, fixing hair, signaling, and sometimes mouthing lines. Journalist JonBenét observed. It wasn't JonBenét performing, it was Patsy performing through her. Patsy's language about her daughter showed possession, not natural affection. She called her, or showpiece, my little creation, perfect gift. She never said, JonBenét loves. But always. We decided that Patsy didn't care as much as she claimed to emerge in her handling of JonBenét's health. On December 17, 1996, Patsy called pediatrician Dr. Beef 3 times, but didn't take the child in for an exam. Police records show Dr. Beef noting Patsy sought reassurance, not a diagnosis, she just wanted to hear everything was fine. This pattern suggests avoidance, rather than proactive care. Bedwetting persisted until JonBenét was 6, soaking sheets regularly. Wilcox described mornings where the girl woke up wet, and Patsy would yell instead of comforting her. Griffin recalled Patsy confiding about this before Christmas, sounding more frustrated that it ruined the image than worried about the cause. Daily attention felt skewed, too. JonBenét slept with her mother many nights. Not out of fear but because Patsy wanted her close. Patsy would wake her midnight for singing practice, line readings, or costume fittings. Wilcox once saw JonBenét slumped asleep on a chair, lips still painted, like a doll not yet stripped of makeup. Patsy's behavior after the death further highlights this disconnect. She chose a white dress and crown for the burial, calling it, or final pageant. She requested items like the My Twin doll and Little Miss Christmas medal for the casket. On television, Patsy cried but constantly adjusted her hair, lipstick, and lighting before cameras, as noted by CBS crews. Detective Steve Thomas wrote of in her grief, she was performing. This reinforced the view that she focused on appearing sorrowful more than feeling the raw pain. JonBenét began resisting lightly by late 1996, not wanting itchy dresses or long hair. Patsy snapped back, "You'll ruin everything we've worked for." Griffin heard Patsy cry one night, over JonBenét not listening. Bedwetting flared up around Christmas, with Thomas noting wet bedding found that morning, freshly laundered. Theories suggest Patsy snapped upon discovering another accident, lashing out in frustration over the imperfection, leading to a head injury and staging. This fits a mother obsessed with control, triggered by insults to her ideal image. Tension built after JonBenét's last performance on December 20, 1996. Patsy was disappointed John arrived late, missing part of it. On Christmas night, she hosted a big party where JonBenét was tired and didn't want photos. Witnesses said Patsy pushed her to sit on Santa Bill McReynolds' lap for shots despite reluctance. These behaviors reflect emotional loss of control and a need to maintain appearances at all costs. We trace this back to Patsy's cancer reshaping her priorities. Survival meant projecting perfection through JonBenét, turning care into curation. Friends noted how Patsy, post-treatment, threw herself into pageants as therapy, but it came at the child's expense. Wilcox's stories of ignored fevers for shoots underline this. The girl's needs secondary to the image. Griffin confided Patsy's pageant dissections after losses showed obsession, ready to spend anything for a win. John called some parents vicarious living unhealthy, hinting at Patsy's drive. Nidra's doll baby label and showgirl outfit ideas reinforced treating JonBenét as an object. Daily routines suffered, McDonald's outings nixed because makes you fat. Teaching the girl image pressures early. School performances mixed with pageants blurred lines, with JonBenét crying at a Christmas party over not feeling beautiful, possibly from peer comments. Patsy's denial of a pageant room in depositions clashed with realities, downplaying the intensity. Her post-death choices, like the burial outfit from a recent pageant buy, echoed this, JonBenét eternally the perfect doll. As we line up these details, Patsy's language in interviews reveals more decisions, framed as, "weh," rather than the child's wants. Health calls sought quick fixes, not deep care. Bedwetting frustration built resentment, per Confidantes. After the murder, her performance like grief suggested focus on optics. Resistance from JonBenét escalated tensions. Refusing dresses led to arguments over ruined efforts. Christmas stresses amplified this, with the party pushing the tired girl into photos. Theories tie this to a breaking point discovering a mess, reacting violently, then covering. It paints a unified psychological profile. A woman haunted by near death, channeling survival into controlling her daughter's image, where imperfections triggered disaster. JonBenét, as the living doll, bore the weight of this rebirth, her real needs sidelined for the fuckhead. Patsy's actions, from pageant prep to post-loss rituals, show care twisted into possession, belying her claims of unconditional love. The true suspect. It seems clear that Patsy's role in concealing evidence was substantial. However, turning back to the biggest question in this case, who was the killer, her role might need more evidence than just a few papers and statements. As we line up the details in our analysis of the JonBenét Ramsey case, the focus on Patsy as the central figure has dominated discussions for over 2 decades. Media and public opinion zeroed in on her as the perfectionist mother prone to anger, the one whose handwriting matched the ransom note, and someone with plenty of traces leading back to her. But we have to ask, why do all these R's point so obviously to Patsy, almost too conveniently, and if Patsy was the one crafting this perfect doll image through JonBenét, who was really pulling the strings when everything fell apart? This flips the script, raising the possibility that John Ramsey, the calm, powerful man with a knack for control, was the one orchestrating the narrative to steer suspicion away from himself. On the surface, Patsy emerges as the easy target, with evidence stacking up in ways that make her look guilty at first glance. The ransom note, found on the spiral staircase that morning of December 26, 1996, was written with a pen from the house on paper torn from Patsy's own notepad. Its dramatic, emotional tone, full of threats and odd phrases like small foreign faction, seemed tailor-made for scrutiny, inviting handwriting experts to compare it to her samples. Analysts noted similarities in letter shapes, like the way she formed U's and Q's, and the overall style felt personal, not like a stranger's quick scribble. Why would a real kidnapper risk composing something so lengthy on site, using household items? It positioned Patsy front and center, especially since the demanded $118,000 matched John's bonus almost exactly, but her denials and emotional delivery in interviews amplified the spotlight. Then there's her behavior that morning, still in the same clothes from the previous night's party at the Whites. She called 911 with a voice that sounded shaky and scripted to some ears. Officers arriving found her distraught, which fit the profile of someone overwhelmed by guilt. We trace this back to the initial chaos, Patsy on the phone, describing the note, while John read it over her shoulder. Her reactions came across as raw and impulsive, the kind that draws eyes in a true crime breakdown. DNA and fiber evidence further cemented Patsy as the visible suspect. Fibers consistent with her red sweater were found on the duct tape over JonBenét's mouth and on the blanket wrapping JonBenét. Touch DNA on the long johns also raised questions, though later testing complicated things. These traces made her an open book for investigators, easy to probe with warrants and interviews. Her psychological profile added fuel post-cancer instability, an obsession with control, and frustration over JonBenét's bedwetting painted a motive that screamed emotional snap. Thomas's theory in his book laid it out. Patsy, irritated by another accident on Christmas night, might have yanked the girl in the bathroom, causing a head injury, then panicked and staged the rest. It all fit too neatly, a mother whose life revolved around perfection, breaking under holiday stress. But doesn't this convenience beg the question, why leave such obvious trails if she was covering up? The ransom note's length, her unchanged clothes, the fibers, all trackable, all pointing straight at her like breadcrumbs. It makes Patsy the perfect suspect, predictable, readable, and prosecutable on the surface. Digging deeper, John Ramsey emerges as the one operating in the shadows, his actions suggesting a level of control that shielded him while exposing Patsy. He was the one who discovered JonBenét, not the police or search teams. Around 1 p.m. on December 26, after Detective Linda Arndt suggested checking the house again, John headed downstairs alone with friend Fleet White. He zeroed in on the wine cellar room, flipping on the light and spotting JonBenét under a blanket. Why did he find her so quickly in a house full of rooms, just minutes after police had overlooked it? Arndt noted John seemed to know where to go, acting like a man who already anticipated what he'd uncover. Upon seeing her, he scooped up JonBenét, carried it upstairs, and laid it on the living room floor, destroying the original scene. He removed the tape from her mouth and tried loosening wrist bindings, actions that contaminated potential DNA, fingerprints, fiber positions, and the entire evidentiary chain. Officers described it as a father's panic, but forensically, it erased critical traces. Any touched DNA on the blanket or JonBenét got muddled by his handling, and the movement disrupted the staging analysis. Why rush to move her if preserving evidence mattered? This made direct charges against him tricky. Paternal instinct provided cover, hard to prosecute as deliberate tampering. John also controlled the space and who entered the home that day. He decided who stayed and who left, directing friends and even police movements to some extent. When officers first arrived, he discouraged a full basement search, focusing them elsewhere. Arndt recalled John pacing and overseeing the scene, his demeanor calm amid the chaos. He was the one who called friends and the pastor over, turning the house into a gathering spot before it was fully secured. By 10 a.m., a dozen people milled about, touching surfaces and tracking in debris, which hopelessly contaminated DNA samples and footprints. John justified it as needing support for prayer, but the effect was to dilute the suspect pool and muddy the physical evidence. Why invite a crowd if not to complicate the forensics? His business background, running a billion-dollar company, equipped him for crisis management, not grief-stricken impulsivity. Later that day, after JonBenét was found, John arranged for the family to leave the scene quickly, coordinating with lawyers by evening. This proactive stance kept him steps ahead, his moves hard to nail as criminal, while Patsy's emotional displays invited deeper scrutiny. John's relocation of the family sealed this pattern. Right after the funeral on December 31, he whisked Patsy and Burke out of Boulder to Atlanta, changing phone numbers, addresses, and legal contacts overnight. Police hadn't finished initial interviews or warrants, yet John reframed it as escaping media hounds. This wasn't the act of a shattered father but someone managing fallout, severing easy access for investigators. He hired a PR team and lawyers within hours of the discovery, shaping the public story toward an intruder while Patsy's handwriting and denials took the heat. In 1997 interviews, John cooperated selectively, providing samples that cleared him on key points like DNA, but his comments on Patsy's stress and cancer subtly shifted focus her way. The grand jury in 1999 recommended indicting both on misdemeanor in death and accessory charges, but John's scene alterations drew less fire than Patsy's note links. His discovery spun as heroic, hers as suspicious. Why did his actions evade the same intensity? His calm during the 9/11 call, reading the note silently while Patsy spoke, suggested foreknowledge to some. He claimed being awake early that morning, searching the house before police arrived. Yet no one pressed his timeline as hard as Patsy's. We traced John's influence through the early hours. He read the note first, instructed Patsy on the call, then managed arrivals. His basement trip earlier that day, checking for broken windows but missing JonBenét, raised flags. Why overlook the wine cellar then but find it later? Arndt sensed something off, noting John avoided eye contact and seemed detached. As the case dragged, John pushed DNA testing that eventually cleared the family in 2008 under Dea Mary Lacey, but critics like Thomas argued it ignored his scene tampering. Patsy's visible cracks, bedwetting frustrations, pageant obsession, made her the lightning rod, while John's calculated steps stayed in shadow. He even contributed to her scrutiny by allowing handwriting comparisons and emotional narratives to dominate, directing police fully toward her. In 2000 depositions, John's responses were measured, contrasting Patsy's denials on items like the bear. This dynamic suggests he knew the story's end, acting to protect himself by letting Patsy's trails absorb the hits. His company milestone there, hitting $1 billion, showed a man used to control, applying it here to evade direct blame. Patsy's actions, easily tracked through calls and items, paled against John's harder-to-probe maneuvers, like JonBenét movement and crowd invitation. The unanswered call in the note, promised by 10 a.m., went unchecked as John focused elsewhere, buying time. This flips the narrative, Patsy as the emotional front, John as the director, ensuring suspicion landed unevenly. We now turn to the lingering doubt. Was Patsy really the one behind everything in this case? Or does the setup make her the fall guy while someone else pulled strings? Over 2 decades, public and media scrutiny locked onto Patsy as the perfectionist mom with a short fuse, her handwriting linked to the ransom note, and plenty of trails leading back to her emotional outbursts. But why does it all point so clearly to her, almost like a setup? And if Patsy crafted this perfect doll life through JonBenét, who took over when the facade crumbled? This raises the spotlight on John Ramsey, the composed executive with power and poise, potentially staging the story to deflect from himself. Patsy stands out as the obvious target, with clues stacking up in plain sight. The ransom note, penned with a household Sharpie on her notepad, carried a theatrical, heartfelt tone, threats mixed with personal flourishes, that screamed for analysis. Experts pored over it, noting matches in her letter loops and phrasing, making it a bullseye for suspicion. Her actions that morning of December 26 fueled this. Still in party clothes from the Whites gathering the night before, she dialed 911 with a trembling voice, describing the note in a way that sounded rehearsed to some ears. Officers found fibers from her red jacket on the duct tape and blanket, plus touched DNA ties that kept her in the crosshairs. Her post-cancer mindset, clinging to control, snapping over bedwetting, painted a tidy emotional motive, like a mom unraveling under holiday pressure. Thomas's book laid out the scenario Patsy, frustrated by another accident, might have lashed out, causing the head blow, then covered with the device and note. It all aligned too perfectly, turning her into the reachable suspect, predictable from her pageant obsession and visible breakdowns. Yet beneath this, John emerges as the shadow operator, his moves suggesting he orchestrated diversions. With his background as CEO of Access Graphics, a data storage firm hitting $1 billion in 1996, he grasped evidence trails, chain of custody, and calculated responses better than most. Boulder police described him as extremely cautious in every statement, measuring each answer. On DNA, unknown male traces under JonBenét's nails and on her clothing didn't match him, but contamination muddied it. JonBenét moved. Blanket shifted, clothing adjusted. John's hug of JonBenét upon discovery blended any perpetrator DNA with his own, ruining clear testing. Why act so swiftly if not to obscure? Missing items add to this. His personal computer, diaries, and work schedules vanished within 48 hours, never recovered. Photos, videos, and desk papers from the main floor disappeared before full sealing, slipping through cracks he might have exploited. John legalized the disruption too, calling lawyers and private investigators within hours, turning the probe into a media battle. He held press conferences, reframing as a family's fight against injustice, justifying cleanups like floor wiping or laundry as post-shock prep. In interviews, he cooperated on camera, but let Patsy do most talking, steering questions her way with lines like, "Patsy knows more than I do." In a 1997 chat with Lou Smith, he noted her handwriting and energy suited the note, subtly guiding focus while staying objective. He provided her old writing samples to police, agreed to her hair and nail tests, but refused his own root DNA pull, contrast that piled pressure on her. John even downplayed his denials publicly, saying he didn't think she wrote it, but doing little to prove otherwise, letting doubts linger. This tactic kept her in the hot seat, her emotional slips easy to track through linguistics and forensics. As we wrap up this deep dive into the JonBenét Ramsey case on the channel, reflecting on 29 years since that tragic Christmas, one thing stands clear even with fresh footage surfacing. Like those pageant clips shedding light on everyday moments, the investigation hasn't seen the breakthrough it deserves. We've pieced together timelines, family dynamics, and lingering questions, but at the end of the day, no definitive answers have emerged. The Santa beer's origin, Patsy's statements, and John's composed handling all fuel discussions, yet they remain grounded in speculation rather than solid proof. In my view, this highlights how complex true crime can be. Evidence gets contaminated, narratives shift, and personal biases color interpretations. We must remember JonBenét as the innocent child at the center, not just a puzzle to solve. From a personal standpoint, the biggest lesson here is the fragility of justice in high-profile cases. Early mishandlings like allowing family access to the scene show how procedural lapses can derail truths forever. It reminds us to approach these stories with empathy, respecting the Ramseys' ongoing pain. Patsy passed in 2006 still under a cloud John has rebuilt amid scrutiny, and Burke lives privately. As armchair analysts, we chase leads, but real resolution needs forensic advances and unbiased probes, not endless theories. This case teaches patience. Updates like DNA retests in 2023 tease hope, but without closure, it's a sobering call to honor victims by seeking facts over sensationalism. Thanks for joining this exploration. Let's keep discussing responsibly in the comments.